who's joining us for our webinar today about grad school and hopefully a lot of things that you'd like to know about going to grad school we can help answer. So this webinar is going to be put on by the STEM Inclusion Council, or SIC, by students from the University of Oklahoma. So everybody here is a graduate student in several different departments at the University of Oklahoma. So our purpose, like I said, is to provide a lot of information for the undergrads out there. We're going to introduce the grad students a little bit later, but right now we're first going to start with Dr. Sarah Mata, who's going to give us a presentation you can see here. So Sarah, if you could go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, as Paula mentioned, my name is Sarah Mata, and I go by the pronouns she, her, hers. I'm a research associate for the Core Explains Institute at the University of Oklahoma. I work with an NSF grant promoting interdisciplinary research with graduate students and faculty. But with that work, I've also become really entrenched in helping undergraduates to be better prepared for graduate education. And so this is one of my passions in working with a lot of students. So thank you all for being here. Please feel free to ask any questions along the way in regards to the chat. If you have any particular questions that deal with something that I've mentioned, feel free to do that. All right, so just wanted to briefly go over the session will include why graduate college should be considered. So those of you who are on the fence, or do I go and work full time, or do I come straight into graduate education? We'll answer some of those questions. Why it's important to think about a graduate degree, and everybody might say, oh, it's so expensive. What is the value of a graduate degree? And then just beginning the process, because it is a lengthy process. If you are doing it in the way that most graduate students do in regards to prepping for the process, and things to consider when you're applying. So I just want to address first and foremost the importance of imposter syndrome. There's always going to be anxiety and fear as you go through this process. Do I belong? Am I good enough? Those questions you're going to get. Usually some rejections, and that's just part of the process, unfortunately. So we have to continuously fight that battle. And along the way, you're going to hit some stumps too. So just want to make sure that you're always dealing with ways in which you're addressing your own imposter syndrome or your own anxiety and fears about this process. And I tell the story about an individual who is saying, oh, it's going to take forever to get to my, a PhD. That's 8 years. Well, in 8 years, you'll still be doing something, right? So is that time worth investing to continue to get that degree? Or are you just going to be working and not have the degree? So always trying to think about, like, yes, it is an investment of time and it is an investment of energy, but thinking about, like, that time's going to pass anyway, right? Like, why not continue and think about a graduate degree in the process? So I just like to show this to be able to give you an understanding of why there is such a variety and range and diversity when it comes to graduate education, or where there is a lack of diversity, actually, where you look at the different fields and you look at the lack of representation, which is truly a lack of representation. And so I think this is important to be aware so that we know where we need some representation and to continue to have our fields be broadened and have more representation of different race and ethnic backgrounds in all of these different fields. You can see there's huge disparities in representation. And this one is also something that is really interesting to me in thinking about just in this particular, in all disciplines within doctoral recipients. So this was in 2015 data, and looking at where there is just small percentages of specifically Black and Hispanic students, making up only 6% and 7%. And I think this one is like less than 1% are Native American. And so again, why we need this representation is really important because we see such a lack of it within higher education and graduate degrees. And just briefly, this is another one looking at how we can see the number of degree holders from 2000 to 2018 and how small the numbers go down when you increase graduate education. Again, why would there such a need for more representation and why these kind of events and programs are so important, reaching out to diverse students to help them to be better prepared for the process and know what the process really looks like, because there are a lot of questions along the way. So things to consider. As I mentioned, some graduate programs are really looking at you and assessing how much experience have you had. So that's all going to depend on what degree field you're looking at, what programs you're looking at. So weighing that in, you know, if you're going to graduate with your bachelor's degree or you're going to go straight into grad school, you need to look at what your field particular requires or what's more beneficial. Some of the more competitive programs might ask for, you know, 3 years of experience before you get into the PhD programs. Some expect you to come straight in after your bachelor's degrees. Can you do part-time, full-time, and who's all involved in those decisions? I think we often forget about our non-traditional students who are thinking about this route, where it's not just about their decisions, but maybe they have family, maybe they have children. So those are things to consider in making these decisions, because it's going to impact all those involved who are a part of the process. And is it a feasible option for you to go like out of state or go far from the institution where you're currently in? Thinking about your field of focus and the career goals known for your industry are also things that are really important. One of the caveats that I want to mention, and I think it's important, is graduate education and the things going on right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you know, for you all as undergraduates who are participating and thinking about, do I take the pass-fail grade? Do I, you know, still get the letter grade? You know, sometimes the graduate programs that you might be applying to could have previously been pretty stickler in the sense that they want to see a letter grade for a class that you're taking that is required for the graduate program. Everything's uncertain right now. If you have a good grade in those core classes, I would recommend you taking a letter grade. But if you feel it's going to be something that you just want to get through it and you're going to take that pass, then that's what you have to do. But I just want to put that out there, that we don't really know what graduate programs are going to do, because at one point they were really particular about that. Now with everybody having to deal with the pass-fail kind of process, that's something to also consider. And again, how we see graduate education might be completely different in the fall, even in the year from now. Just want to be mindful of that as we go forward. Those might be questions you have. And again, there's so much uncertainty about how that stuff is going to play out in the long run. So when you're choosing the graduate program, allow enough time to make an informed decision. So that's why I say it can be very timely. You want to be able to provide enough time, look at the timelines in which your graduate programs are on. When are the deadlines that you're wanting to apply? You know, a lot of juniors start this process starting now, and in the summertime, maybe they take the GRE. You know, these are things that you need to be preparing for. But if you're a senior and you're graduating this year, doesn't mean you're completely left out of the opportunities for graduate education in the fall. It just means different programs have different timelines. But for the most part, the good time to be able to start thinking about this is as a junior at this point in time of the year, preparing in the summer, and then your applications and things would start going out in the fall, because most fall deadlines are either December, January. At the latest, I've seen some in February. But again, it just depends on what your field is. Sometimes there's programs that have rolling admissions, and so that's very different than those who are much more strict about their graduate education process. What the costs are. Don't ever feel bad about asking for application waivers. I know sometimes we'll go to conferences and they'll have tables and students will go up, hey, do you have any waivers that you give to students who are applying to your grad programs? And they usually do. So don't feel bad about asking for those things. Those things can add up if you're applying to multiple programs. So making sure you take that into consideration. Find out about the programs. Are they going to provide teaching assistantships, research assistantships, tuition waivers? So a lot of times when students they're thinking about graduate education and they're really unfamiliar, they don't know that sometimes grad programs will help to and pay you to be part of their grad programs. And because they think it's just going to be really too costly for them. But if you get into a really good program that's going to take care of their students, you know that you should expect a potential tuition waiver as well as an assistantship, which helps to basically pay you to be in the graduate program to do the research that you're interested in. So all of these things you're going to have to be part of the consideration of how you make your decision. So I always suggest that students have an Excel sheet to make sure that they're marking these things, who they're applying to, what they're applying to, what program they're applying to, who the faculty are part of those programs. You need to know those backgrounds of where those faculty are have been as well, because that can be also more informing as well as when you're making your decision. Thinking about location, when you're also looking at your faculty. Oh, sorry, back one. Isn't it? Are those faculty accessible? So I know, like, I've had students this semester who have applied to places because they see the big names and they want to work with those faculty, and that's fantastic. But are they really accessible to help you, to mentor you, to be a part of your research? Is something that you need to ask. You also need to ask when you're looking at this faculty at that institution, is there more than one faculty that you're interested in working with? Because there's always that possibility that that one faculty you went there for could leave. Then what happens? What happens to your research? What happens to your interests? Are you going to be stuck in a place where you're not going to have the support that you came in thinking you were going to have? And thinking about if you have a class or you have your particular interest and you have a faculty who currently is teaching your class, ask them if they have any connection to other faculty, because they're really connected, and so they can be able to say, oh, you should look at my colleague who's at NYU. That might be somebody you're interested in working with because they're doing similar work. They might be doing XYZ. So those are things, always reach out to the resources that you have, and especially capitalize on that rapport that you have with the faculty you currently work with. And thinking about the location, do you have are you able to go wherever and look at whatever program? Are you looking at mid-tier versus the top-tier programs? And what kind of university in regards to the status? So I know that there are programs where if you're looking at a PhD at that program, the likelihood of getting a faculty position at a Research 1 institution might be really low. So those are some questions that you need to ask depending on what your long-term trajectory is, and thinking about what that institution can provide for you in the long run. So these are a lot of questions, a lot of things that I'm throwing at you, but hopefully you can understand and make sense and try to think about these things as you begin. Can you move? So those are, again, other things that I have students who are like, I really think I need to stay in Oklahoma. If that's the case, then what programs are going to be best fit for you here in the state? If you only have considerations for the current university that you're at, then what's going to be the best fit for you? If you can move, are you going to move? Do you want to move somewhere cold? Especially if you're thinking about a PhD, you're thinking about being there for a long term of time. You know, those are things it gets lonely. I can tell you that. Number one, in graduate programs, there's going to be some time when you're away from your family. You might not be able to go home for holidays like you thought you might be able to. You have commitments and responsibilities in your grad programs. Are you going to be able to make it? So all these things, again, are considerations that you need to think about. So if you're not able to move, what programs are available, and are they flexible in the sense that if you're having to stay and you're place bound, what are those commitments that you're having to make, and are the programs going to be flexible enough for you to make those commitments? Also, the things to consider about the particular university. So as I mentioned, there's midterm, there's mid-tier, there's top tier, but also when you start thinking about the university itself, what's the culture of the institution? What are the culture of the college and the programs? So I can't tell you, I've had more than at least 2 students who've done visits the last semester to their number one. They are so excited. They want to go to this school. This is their number one school. And they get there and they don't like it. And it has to do with the culture of the programs. And so that is why it's so important. And I'll say this later on, making sure you have an opportunity to visit those programs. So just because it's a big name and you think it's like the best school to go to, you also have to take into consideration the culture of that institution and what it might feel like do they value their graduate students, or are you just another person who's teaching their classes? So these are things, again, to consider. You can find out a lot of information about universities by going to their websites. Good websites, they'll have this information. If they've had climate surveys to be able to say, do their faculty like their jobs? Do the students like their jobs? Do the students have a good experience while they were there? All of these things that when you graduate, you'll be getting inundated with surveys from your university to be able to provide this insight for other students. And so you can go and utilize this information to find out what are the graduation rates for each program, and were the students satisfied? Do the offices and the programs and the staff, do they support their graduate students? As I've mentioned before, it's really important to find out what the culture of those different programs are. In the sense, do they support their students holistically? Providing an assistantship, that's great, but are they going to be there to support their students when you are lonely, when you don't have any resources, or when you're really struggling? It's financial support, as I mentioned, fellowships, scholarships, loan assistantships. These are things you need to find out up front. As I mentioned, the experience on a campus visit is, if you make that visit, it's really important to see how people treat you. Just even, are they nice? That could be as simple as how you feel about being there and how connected you feel to those individuals. And if you're coming with a family or a spouse or a significant other, are there accommodations at the institution in regards to, is there graduate student housing? Is it available for families? These kind of things are important. Again, if it's not just yourself, you're coming. So this is a lot of words, but I promise we'll get through this. So things to consider about the particular program that you're interested in. Determine the most important factors in making this decision and rank them in the order that you are. Like, if you know you want to go to the Northeast, that's great. Then you're going to look at those programs first. If you know that you would really prefer to be somewhere that is focused in this particular area, here's the schools you're looking at. You want to look at finances, the program quality, the quality of faculty, the level of faculty interaction, student life. Does the graduate college have particular programs and groups for supporting students? Is there more than just here's graduate college and it's a place where you deliver all your forms? Or is there more to it that's really intentional about supporting graduate students? Compare the experiences you have with each program as you're collecting these data, right? And you can do this test, is what I like to have students do, and send a email or make a phone call, and were they nice when they answered? Did they answer all your questions? Did they have the information readily available, or did they have to track it down? Were there a lot of like, I don't know, I have to transfer you? Those are things that you pay attention to. Did they seem to care, right? Were they informed? Were they professional? And what about the admissions and program staff, how did they behave during the campus visit? You're testing them just as much as they're testing you, right? Like, you really want to be able to make these decisions where you feel like you're going to be comfortable in that space and place, and they're going to value you in that space and place. And the websites, I can't tell you how many students have complained about websites based on not having up-to-date information, information that is no longer relevant. These are things that if the programs are really invested in recruiting graduate students who are well informed, they're going to make an effort to have that information on their website. So those could be signs as well. If you have to dig multiple places just to try to find where you need to get where you need to go, or you go off and you're like, how did I get there? Those are also signs that you need to be aware that there's not attention paid to those kind of things. And what did the online application process look like? That's also another important one, because things can get shuffled. You know, do you go to the grad college and have to fill out their application process, and then the department's application process? All of those things, are they talking to each other? Is there challenges in that sense? That could be a sign too. So continuing, as I mentioned, looking at the graduation and dropout rates is really important. Most programs will put on their website somewhere time to degree, the average time to degree. On average, most programs, good programs, are like 5-6 years. But if we're seeing that the average time to degree, or the percentage of students who actually graduate from the program are like 50-60%, that's not a good sign. You're saying 50 or 60 people who you admit in the program don't graduate before the 9-year span. And so why is that? That could be problematic. We want to see this, that graduate programs are really invested in giving their students the education they came in for and graduating them in a time. And there's always going to be problems. There could be situations in which your time to degree can be extended, but if it's habitual by the department, then that can also lead to other things, and why there's not that support in getting students in and out to graduation to career, right? Even the rates of gender and ethnicity for students of color who are going, as I mentioned, there's really low rates in the first place getting and finishing graduate education, but going to a program where you're the only person of color in a predominantly white institution can have its own challenges, and will have its own challenges. So finding out what's the department, what's their commitment to diversity, and how they might be able to, you find that information via their rates of graduation and that type of thing is also should be listed. And how long does your funding last? Is it, first 2 years and then the final 2 years you have to fund yourself? Those are things you might want to consider thinking about, because it can be expensive when you don't have that support system. And then I know for my previous institutions, I get the survey. They want to know, are you in your field that you graduated your degree from? That information, again, should be available on the website to find out what the alumni's achievements are. Are they working in the field? Are they out there representing the field that you're a part of? Those are things that are really important to consider as well. So things to do, going through this pretty quickly. Develop a spreadsheet. Talk to other graduate students when you make those visits. Assess the community. Is this a place that you feel like you would want to live in? Do you like the town? Find out, are there cultural and spiritual needs that meet your expectations? Do they have do you have access to the cultural and spiritual needs that are nearby, maybe not in that small town or your college town, but perhaps outside? Those are things that might be important and are part of the process in looking at the research. Again, does a graduate college or are there graduate programs that have student organizations that you can talk to, that you feel like, even if you are the only student of color in your program, are there other places in which you can find some community that have similar backgrounds. And as I mentioned this earlier, so just test the program, give a call, see how they respond to you as a potential graduate student, or is it just, that don't really take the time to invest in you. I would say that because all graduate programs, for the most part, ask you to do some type of writing piece, work on your writing. I know that all of you, and I would even say for myself, writing was never anything that I knew was of importance to the extent it is, and how much you'll need it in your graduate programs. So work on your writing, get feedback, go to the writing center, especially for your personal statement when you have to make these applications. This is really important to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. Do not be afraid to ask others for help. I think that's one of my most biggest words of advice, is that you need to go to multiple people, and not just your best friend, but people who have been doing this work, or graduate students who are already in their programs, asking their advice. Hey, does this sound like it's something I should be saying, or should I say it this way? All those things are really, really important. Apply. Involve your family and friends. So if you're first generation, sometimes your family does not understand the process and they don't understand what you're going through. But the more you include them, the more you try to help to inform them, the more at ease they will be about you potentially leaving, and the more at ease you will feel about going through this process, because those are really important parts of, you want to make sure that your family feels okay about you going across the US if that's something you have to do, especially in a arena that they have no understanding because they haven't gone through the process. Trust your guts. It is a long haul from start to finish when you start going through this process, and it might seem tedious and you might get overwhelmed, and there's just a lot of information to take in. There is a finish line, and so that's where we eventually want you to go. Find other support systems, other grad students. Programs like this is really important. And don't let the fear of the unknown keep you from obtaining your full potential. And if that's a graduate program for you, that's fantastic. We want that for you, and we don't want it to be the fear that prohibits you from getting to that process. This is my information. Kept it at 30 minutes, Ellen. Turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome. That was really wonderful. So that was our Sarah's presentation for basic stuff, which really covered a bunch of wonderful information. And so now we're going to move into the portion where we've got all of our graduate students up on the screens. Hopefully we can see that. And I guess before we start with that part, I want to remind us to keep our mics on mute. And if folks want to jump in with comments on things, put your hand up and I'll moderate who gets to speak next so that we're not speaking over each other. So first, I guess I'd like to have everybody introduce themselves, and I'll go first. I'm Paula. I'm a first-year PhD student here at the University of Oklahoma. I did my master's here, and right now I'm studying movement behavior and ecology, focusing on birds. So let's go with Mernas.
I'm going to pause for a second, Paula. Sorry, I want to get some windows on the stream up so we can actually see everyone. Give me 1 minute.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say.
That was Jonathan Michael. He's our go-to grad student for fixing all of our technical problems.
Okay, once the delay is over, that should be good. Sorry.
No, this is awesome. Great, thank you. Okay, Marnaz, I think you can go ahead.
My name is Mehnaz. I'm a third-year PhD candidate, and I work on Drosophila speciation and the female aspect of Drosophila behavior.
Great, thanks. Stephanie Prado-Carpo?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Prado Carbonell. I'm in a 2-year master's program, finishing up my first year. I'm in mechanical engineering. I study combustion of flames. I look at renewable fuels such as biodiesel as well as diesel fuel, and I study the emissions of the flames.
And Kara Brown?
Hello, I'm Kara. I am in my first year in graduate PhD program in clinical psychology. So I actually did my undergrad degree at OU, and now I'm at WSU doing my PhD. So, and I'm studying infant development, neurodevelopment.
Ed?
I'm Ed Higgins. I am a third-year PhD candidate, and I am studying freshwater streams and interactions between freshwater mussels and the microbiome in the sediment.
Jordan?
Hey everybody, my name is Jordan, and I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate in the philosophy department, and my dissertation focuses on the ethics of character and social epistemology.
Thanks. And Erica?
Hi everyone, I'm actually an undergraduate at OU right now, but I just finished the process of applying to grad schools and interviewing. And in the fall, I'm going to be starting my PhD at Indiana University, and I'm going to be studying the evolution and diversification of beetle horns and horned beetles.
Okay, Jessica McLaughlin.
I'm Jess. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a third-year PhD candidate, and I study speciation genomics in tropical birds, primarily in Panama.
Mellon?
Hi, my name is Milan Pundit. I'm a third-year PhD candidate in the OU biology department, and I study how anthropogenic disturbances like noise and climate change will affect avian behavior, specifically parental care behavior and singing behavior.
And Jonathan?
Hi, I'm John. I'm a third-year microbiology grad student at OU here. I study microbes and microbial communities in a highly contaminated nuclear waste site.
That's so cool. Okay, so hopefully we've got some questions streaming in, and those are going to be moderated by Esmeralda. So Esmeralda, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Esmeralda Alcala, and I'm a junior currently minoring in microbiology, and I'm an undergrad, and I'm basically in the process of starting all this. So yeah. So the first question that we have is from Sam R. And she's applying to grad schools right now, mostly masters. And she can see herself, or they, doing a PhD. And they want to know if it's better to go straight into a PhD program or get a master's then apply to a PhD.
So since I skipped Trey, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe have an input for that question?
Hey, I'm Trey. I am a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Oklahoma, and I study the evolution of sex in live-bearing fishes and mate preferences. I guess from my perspective, I jumped straight into my PhD from my bachelor's. I think there are certain benefits going either way if you know what your career goal is. So I wanted to be a professor when I finished, so I jumped straight into the PhD. But if you have other career goals, then I would suggest looking at what degree requirements are necessary for that position. Because a lot of times if you get a PhD, you might come off overqualified if you didn't do your research ahead. But I think jumping into a PhD is doable, but it's also dependent on the field that you go into. Some degrees require masters, some degrees you can jump straight in. Guess that's my input.
So I see Jessica, Ms. Laughlin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I actually have a master's from University of Alaska Fairbanks that I did. I also did my bachelor's there, and so for me, even though I knew from when I was in undergrad that I wanted to be that I wanted to go into academia, I wanted to be a museum curator and do research. I didn't really know what I wanted to do research in. I just knew that I liked birds and genetics. And it's very intimidating to go and apply for a PhD program just in general, but especially when it's like, I didn't really have a strong specific interest and just like, you just say, oh, I want to study genetics. There's so much. So I felt really overwhelmed. So I got the opportunity to do a master's with the Museum of the North in Fairbanks. And for me, like I think that for me, that was definitely the right path, because it meant that when I started my PhD, I already had, I came in with a lot of skills already developed. I came in already with a really strong project that I've been developing with my advisor here. And it felt like that I was able to hit the ground running. But I know that that's not the choice for everyone. But particularly if you feel like you need to fine tune what exactly you want to do before you commit to spending, 5, 6, 7 years of your life doing it, doing a master's first can be a really good way to do that. And if you're geographically constrained, it can also be really nice, because like I didn't want to leave Fairbanks yet when I was at the end of my bachelor's. So for me, like that worked well. So those are some other things to consider.
Great, thanks. Ed, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out another option, which is what I did when I was thinking of applying to grad school, which was to get work experience. I knew I didn't want to go into academia at the end of all of this. And so as a result, I took 2 years and worked at a biotech startup and got experience using like bench techniques and molecular techniques. And that ended up coming in really handy. And I could also kind of hit the ground running when I started my PhD. So I would say that if you have the opportunity and you're not quite sure exactly what you want to do, another route besides just master's program, you could also go into the workforce and do some stuff and mess around for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to say on that topic? Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. Sam has helpfully put in the chat that they are in epidemiology, which is adjacent to most of us, as most of us are biology. And I think that from my experience with that, like the medical side of stuff, which was what I was doing before I got into environmental micro, a master's in public health is something that can be done alongside of some graduate programs, although it's very like program specific. So that if that's something they're interested in, it would be great to look up. Anyway, sorry. Carry on.
Great. I saw Karis Wilson, you just joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am a first year PhD student in the college or the Department of Communication, College of Arts and Science.
Great. Did you have anybody else have anything to add on that last question?
I just actually got in, so I wish I could add, but I'm not sure what you guys were talking about.
Okay. The question was, if you're looking to go to graduate school, is it a good idea first to get a master's degree and then go for a PhD, or try to, or if you go straight into a PhD program, then do that?
Okay, so I think I was looking at this question before the panel today, and I think it really depends on the person and the situation. I know a lot of people that I spoke with prior to coming to OU said, take a year, before your PhD, take a year before your master's. but there are also some people who, went through fine and they didn't feel stressed. I think depending on how you fared in your master's program or the stress level that you maybe the different obstacles and things like that that you encountered in your undergrad or your master's program might be kind of something that you can use to kind of guide you with if you think it's a good idea to take a break. I know for me, I wish I had taken a break, definitely after my master's, just because I just, with comprehensive exams and things like that, it can just be really stressful. And sometimes you just need time to kind of, just take a step back. But I feel like OU made me a financial offer that I couldn't refuse. And so it's really difficult, I think sometimes, and you have to, just assess what's best for you at that time. And if you can wait, then yes, I definitely would have. But if you don't have a choice, maybe come up with some different strategies and techniques to kind of weather the storm your first year so you're not extremely stressed and feeling like, oh man, I really needed a year break. If that makes sense, that's kind of how I would think about it.
Yeah, I think we have a wide range, and the thing that seems to be coming out is it should be tailored to you and what you think, how you feel after undergrad. I know for me, I took 6 years off from doing after my undergrad and then going back to grad school because I knew I wanted to work in wildlife conservation, but that's such a big field. And so I wanted to get work experience and also an idea of some sort of focus for that.
I was just going to add, I think it definitely depends on, like you said, the discipline or your field. And like I said, also just the workload. I don't know if OU has a program like this, but I know for my undergrad, I did like a university scholars program where, you start your master's degree classes when you're trying to finish up your undergrad degree. And I got my undergrad and my master's at University of Kentucky. So I was kind of trying to do that in the process of doing GREs and also internships and stuff. So I think depending on the discipline or the field, such as you mentioned, Paula, and some other things. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So Esmeralda, are there other questions?
Yes. So how would you go about researching job market trends in sciences, especially when going to PhD level jobs outside of academia?
Was that outside of academia?
Outside academia.
Okay. All right. Open field, guys. Ed?
Can you ask the question one more time, Esmeralda? I'm sorry.
So we mentioned how we can do research as a job when you're going to grad school, and how would you go about researching the job market trends in sciences, especially for PhD level jobs outside of academia?
Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
I could say, since like I mentioned before, I didn't want to go into academia. So looking into the way that I did it was I looked at I went to Indeed.com and the job posting websites and looked for jobs that I would want to apply to and see what they had. And then if you have a field in mind, you can even reach out to people in those fields. I feel like I've reached out to people at different places and they've always been really positive in responding. And if they never respond, then it's no harm, no foul.
Maybe one more person if you've got suggestions.
Okay. Go ahead, Trey.
So when I started my PhD, I definitely wanted to go in academia, but then hindsight, I was like, maybe this isn't the best decision for me. So what actually helped a lot was actually talking to some of my colleagues here, not only my friends in the graduate program, but also some of the professors, because they went through graduate school themselves and have colleagues who decided academia wasn't best for them. And sometimes they reach out to those colleagues and hey, this sounds like a field that you were describing that was really good for this person, maybe, and then getting and contacting them. So a lot of it's networking. Another place to look is if you're going to conferences for your society, a lot of those have workshops and stuff for potential careers outside of academia. And I found those really helpful, especially if you want to do something related to science, but not necessarily within the whole academic institution.
Great. Okay, Esmeralda, are there other questions?
Yes. Is an accelerated master's program still a master's program compared to regular master programs?
Was that is an accelerated program, master's program, the same as a master's program?
Yeah. And person asking is a Mechie major.
Does anybody have thoughts on this? Stephanie.
So for Mechie, if you're an undergrad and you're already working on undergraduate research with a professor and you like the work, it's really easy to transition into an accelerated master's program. It does count as a master's degree. There is a thesis option for accelerated master's program. So yeah, it has the same value.
Anybody else?
I think this is kind of a good time to note that there are also a lot of these things that are going to be kind of specific to your field, and it's worth, like, if you for instance, I feel like all of us biologists were all kind of like, oh, what now? When we heard that, because that's not really a thing, but there are different norms in different fields. And if you reach out to people and who are in those fields and ask some of these questions, that's going to get you a lot of good info. So I've had people reach out and be like to me on Twitter and actually ask questions like, okay, I'm in this field and I don't know what this means. So there's sometimes this stuff is really field specific and there's no one size fits all answer, but don't be afraid to reach out to people to ask those questions.
Twitter is a great resource for that. So Esmeralda, do you have more questions?
Are there any tips for grad student for first gen students wanting to apply to grad schools and either master's or PhD?
Sorry, first gen or first time? What was that?
First gen.
So, point of clarification, do we consider first gen as in the first one in your family to go to any college, or first time applying to graduate school?
Sarah?
First gen is if you don't have anybody in your immediate family who has a bachelor's degree.
Kara? You've had your hand up, sorry, several times.
Well, I was just thinking, because when Esmeralda asked the question, I was thinking, I feel like first gen should be expanded to like graduate school or master's PhD, because I think that they're all three very different experiences. And so while I had, two parents that both got their bachelor's and their master's degree, the PhD experience has been quite an experience so far. And I'm only in my first year. And so while I do have a lot of mentors and things, I think that there are some things that maybe minority students, if you will, may not necessarily have had a lot of experience with other individuals who have pursued a PhD or what that process looks like. But yeah, I guess generally speaking, first gen is technically considered the first one to attend college, but I definitely think that it's worthy to talk about kind of first gen for all of those different, for each level.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for that. Kara Brown, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm actually a first gen student myself, and I think Sarah touched on this in her presentation, but kind of building that support system in your family, even though there might be some, I don't know, kind of like a gap between what your parents might know and kind of what you're going through. So reaching out to professors, mentors, older graduate students, I really found support in those in those areas. And mostly the graduate students is where I really sought that, because they had a lot of advice that I didn't even think to ask about, or that I would need for, especially like interviews, things to include in a personal statement. So yeah, I would say build a support system. Don't forget about your family, because they're definitely there to support you too. But seeking grad students and mentors was a really good place for me.
Great, thank you. Jess McLaughlin, is your hand up too?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kara pretty much nailed what my answer was going to be. I'm not technically completely first gen. My dad did get a bachelor's, but it was in a very different field. It's in a very different field. And I actually am between my brother and I'm actually the only one who went to college. And so my family very much does not understand why I signed up for more and then signed up again for even more college. But I think Kara really nailed it with, it's going to take work in a lot of ways to bring your family around to kind of understanding your motivations for doing this in a lot of cases. But building a support network is really crucial outside of that.
That's great. Does anybody else? Jordan? Yeah.
Thanks. I thought it was a great question. And like other grad students on our panel, I guess my parents have experience in college, but not necessarily in grad school. And so, but one thing that does come to mind that has been really helpful is, and this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but I feel like it's been really true, is different friendships and friendships that you can be vulnerable in, with specifically other graduate students. And kind of what I mean by that is, like, at least this has just kind of been my experience, that there are a lot of pressures and stress in grad school. And like, if you don't have anyone to talk to about those things, it can kind of fester. And so having a support system, not just kind of like, friends in general who care about you, obviously that's important, but like, I always appreciate it when I have other grad student friends who are also in PhD programs or whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm also really stressed out about my prospectus or something like that. I also I feel like I'm behind on the job market stuff. And it's, in a way, it's kind of like, I don't know how to put it, like, you don't feel alone that way. And that has just been really good for kind of like, I think, each other's mental health, when we have those moments where we can share those things. So like finding friendships where you can kind of be vulnerable regarding those things, I think is something that's been helpful for me.
Great. Okay. Stephanie, did you have something to add about this? I think this is an important question, which is why I want to spend maybe another person's time on this one.
So there are set programs to help first generation students. Kara Brown and I were part of McNair Scholars in undergrad, and that's open to all majors. Really great program that prepared me to apply to grad school and to get where I am now. There's also LSAMP, which is the Louis Stokes Alliances for Minority Participation. That is for STEM majors only, but it's also a great program for first generation students specifically. And I would say just professional organizations as a general, like they're saying, find your community, your support system.
Awesome, thank you. Esmeralda, are there more questions?
So I have a question of, like, how do you choose an advisor for a master's or a PhD program?
Awesome question. This might be one of the most important things that you have to do. Who would like to go first? I'm sure that's so many people. No one?
Yeah, excellent question. The biggest thing about choosing an advisor is trying to find someone that will support you. And in terms of support, like, you get to define that. Do you want them to support you on just like in your like professional career, your social life. Like if you have a problem, can you come to them and tell them about it and they won't just immediately dismiss you? Do you want them to like feel happy for you when you've like achieved these accomplishments? Like these are things that you need to decide, but you want an advisor that will like back you up when things get tough. I attended this one webinar and they said like, you may find an advisor or find someone that is doing amazing research and it's like, this is what I want to do. But if that scientist is a terrible mentor, like if they yell at you during a meeting or if they berate you in any way, like that is not that is a hostile work environment. And you do not want to spend, 4 to 6 years in that type of environment. Like it's better to find someone that does support you rather than being with someone that does great science but does not have your back.
Thanks, Milan. And I just want to jump in right there and just say also, one of the best ways to find out how your advisor performs as a mentor is to ask their graduate students and their previous graduate students. And so if you say, how does this person mentor? And the first thing that comes out of their mouths is, like that might not be the greatest sign that this person's a good fit for you.
I was also going to add to thinking about your goals as a scholar, if you want to go into academia or if you want to go into like the private sector. Just kind of going off of what Paula said, I think asking other students, does this advisees graduate on time? How many years does it take? And I think those type of questions are important too, because you'll have some advisors where it's a known thing, like their advisees never graduate on time. It takes them 5 or 6 years to finish. And so, that can be an important thing to kind of think about and consider, especially with funding and how generally most people get 4 years and 5 years, if there's a good reason for that. So that's also something I would think about.
Yeah. Ed, you had your hand up for a little bit.
I just wanted to like kind of pile on to how important the advisor-advisee relationship is, because when I was going through the whole process, I had sort of a faculty that I kind of bombarded with questions. And when I was choosing between grad schools, he told me that he had like talked to a lot of grad students and he had been a grad student and he had never heard, or anytime he heard someone that had a miserable time in grad school, it was not necessarily because of where they were, it was because of who they were working with. And so your advisor is going to have such a disproportionate effect on your experience in grad school that you really need to make sure it's a good fit. And so the only way you're going to make sure that it is a good fit is by reaching out to them and talking to them. I guess the question was how to find one. And I can say that for research-based fields, reading papers that really interest you and that have, some sort of resonance with you. You think the research is cool. You think the conclusions were cool. And then reaching out to the authors. I know I feel like I sound really redundant and always say ask someone else, but like in this case, you really do need to talk to the person that you plan on working with. And then asking them questions about their research is going to fill in those gaps really quickly. I
just want to check. I know, Jess, you've got your hand up. I just want to check. It's coming up on 6:30. Are we able to go over time, or will the meeting shut off completely at 6:30?
So the Zoom meeting will continue. It'll continue after 6:30. I don't believe there is a set time limit on the YouTube stream.
Yeah, the stream will go on as long as we want it to.
Okay. Are people comfortable with continuing for, I don't know, max 15 minutes? Yeah? We're on a roll. Okay. So just so that we can keep getting more questions into, so let's hear your answer, Jess. If you can keep it a little on the shorter side, I'm sorry. And then
Yeah, so I'll just focus on what kind of hasn't been touched on yet. One of the really important things is there's no one size fits all of what a perfect advisor looks like. There's obviously a lot of things in common, like gives you good positive feedback and supports you, but your needs are always like, you're a unique person. How you respond to specific things and what you need to succeed is going to be a little bit different than everyone else. So I really strongly suggest that, like, when you are starting, after you've done the initial, like, reaching out to advisors and asking questions, like, do some self-reflection and ask yourself, like, okay, like, when I'm in a situation where I'm working on something or trying to learn something, like, what's the sort of mentorship that works best for me? And be honest with yourself. I think we all like to all like to tell ourselves that, we're super independent and driven and self-motivated, and that can be true. But, like, also at the same time, like, it's going to be more helpful to yourself if you're honest to yourself and, like, well, actually, I do need an advisor who, like, checks in with me daily to make sure I'm not just, like, screwing around and making progress on stuff. Like, so self-evaluation is important part of this too, knowing what you need so you can find it.
That's a great point. Thank you, Jessica. I guess really quickly, because I saw Sarah and Myrna, both of your hands went up there. Sarah, do you have?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to make sure that folks know you're not married to your advisor. So you might get in and you might be in that relationship with them and you realize this isn't going, it's challenging to negotiate that in a later time, but that's always a possibility. You might come in and find out that there's somebody that you could work better with, and that's always a possibility to make those changes. So just so you know, just because you make that decision early on doesn't mean you're always having to be with that particular advisor.
Yeah, that's great. Manas, do you have?
Just wanted to say Skype meetings and meetings in person helps you much better than just emailing back and forth. So take that opportunity as well.
Yeah. Oh boy, this is a hot topic. Okay, Erica?
Just one quick thing. I think a lot of programs offer rotations where you can do, like when I go to Indiana, I'm going to have 3 5-week rotations. And so I have a good idea of whose lab I want to be in, but I get a little trial run in case that relationship isn't how I imagined it thus far.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I realize some places have that. And Kara Brown, did you have something too?
Yeah, just a quick add-on. Jess had mentioned, like, being honest with yourself, but I also think it's really important to be honest in your personal statement. Sometimes, especially in clinical psychology, programs are looking for, like, either you want to do therapy or you want to do research in academia. So not tailoring your personal statement too far away from what you really want to do, because I feel like that is a really fast and easy way to get into a mentorship relationship that you don't necessarily want to be in, and that's not going to support you fully. So also being honest in your personal statement.
Yes, this is all great. Okay, Esmeralda, do we have more questions?
Can I actually do just a really quick comment on something Erica mentioned on the rotations thing? That's another thing that's really field specific. So just be aware that may not be an option in a lot of fields. Like in ecology and evolutionary biology, it's much more common that you just come in and your advisor is your advisor and you can change if you need to. But I would say rotations on the whole are a lot rarer in EEB programs, but they're more common in others.
That's true. Thanks for pointing that out. Esmeralda, are there other questions?
Yeah. What are the differences between undergrad and grad school life, and how do you manage the transition?
Hands, anybody? I know we have lots to say about this.
That's a big question.
I think the biggest difference between undergrad and grad school life is just like the amount of time you can commit to things. I know when you're an undergrad, like you have to do classes, you usually have like extracurriculars or clubs that you attend. But in grad school, like your time is very valuable. And it's definitely important to have hobbies or have extracurriculars outside of grad school. You need it to like maintain your sanity. But like if you do decide to do like outreach or community service or some type of extracurricular activity, you don't want to affect your performance in grad school. So I think the biggest thing is just managing your time efficiently.
Yeah, I think playing off of Mellon there's way less structure in graduate school. You sort of have to make that structure for yourself. And so that can be challenging at first and then ongoing. But Stephanie, did you have something?
I think the first year of grad school, I was just trying to be a sponge and trying to absorb and try different things and see what worked for me, trying to adjust. One thing I've come to learn is that the classes in grad school are more to me like a side hustle. And then like the main thing is like my research work. That's kind of what my takeaway is in the difference from undergrad.
Cool. Jordan? I'll get to you, Trey, and then Michael.
This is like a really big question. It's a good question. But yeah, something that kind of has stuck out to me, especially like in the past few years, like in the grad experience, is for me, like managing like my time is one thing, but also like managing my energy is another thing. There are certain situations or tasks that, they really win me, and while I'm planning my schedule, that's something I have to be mindful of, and likewise, there are other things that really recharge me. They keep my battery high. And oftentimes it can be tempting to nix those things out of my schedule because they take up time. So for example, like exercising, but it keeps my battery high, it keeps my energy high. And so part of managing my energy for me means protecting those kinds of things that keep me happy.
Yeah, awesome. Good. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we're going to go Trey and then Michael and then Jessica and then Karis here.
Yeah, so kind of echoing everyone else's comments, I think the biggest transition for me was like during undergrad, there's a lot of external motivations. You need to get your grades. You have to have good grades. You have to do all your extracurriculars. There's a lot of incentive to do well in school. Whereas in graduate school, most of the incentive is only coming from you and maybe your advisor. So if you're not a very self-motivated person, you need to find ways to reward yourself of getting those accomplishments done, especially in those things like Jordan was saying that maybe wind you. So like for me, it's like writing. I hate getting down and sitting at the computer and typing things. But if you have some sort of like treat to reward yourself for doing the work that you don't enjoy, then that's going to be a lot better and is going to make the transition from undergrad to graduate school a little bit easier. That's all I have.
That's awesome. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
I mean, I obviously agree with everyone else, but I think I want to tie this back into like, how do you decide between a master's and PhD? If the idea of a PhD where you've got, 5 to 6 years with an undefined end and a relatively nebulous goal doesn't sound super great to you, a master's might actually not be the worst transition, if you will, because with a master's, you can focus more on classes, you can do a much more limited research project and still have something to show for it. Or you could do something like Ed did and I did, which is go into the workforce in a field that is sort of tangentially related to what you think you want to do for grad school. It just lets you get a little time to figure out, all right, do I want to make this big commitment to this, very, very tough thing? So that's all I got.
That's a really good strategy, Ben. Thanks. Jessica?
Yeah, so kind of going at this from a little bit of a different angle. Not only is like how much time you can devote to extracurricular activities and your life outside of school, which is, as you go on, turns from classes being the focus to your research being the focus. But also like what that other stuff is very much changes as well. And I know that was something that kind of tripped me up when I transitioned from undergrad to my master's. is that like your relationship to the university community starts to change. Grads, like, you know, a lot, if you're used to going to like a lot of the programming that universities throw on, you start to realize like, wait, like this is all undergrads. And like that can be fine, but it starts to be different. And just it's like you really start shifting into just, you know, school is all my life to, okay, well, you know, it's not just classes and whatever the programming board is throwing on that's your life. It's like, okay, it's your research in this project. And then like you more and more, at least I know for me, like I started having to rely more on community activities that weren't related to the school. Cause, you know, that's a lot of, you know, it makes sense that the majority of students at a university are going to be undergrads. So most of the programming is going to be for them. But, you know, being a grad student is much different than being a undergrad who lives in the dorms or lives right off campus. Like it's, and part of that's also that, you know, that transit, that rough and entirely pleasant, right? Transition to just being an adult in general.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I apologize if that was a little rambly, but kind of I know that was something that was a big change for me when I started grad school.
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. Karis, did you have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I would recommend. Sorry, I would just say that I would recommend really working on discipline and habits coming out of the junior or senior year of undergrad. If you're still an undergrad, and even if you're going from master's to PhD, I think breaking bad habits and things that may not necessarily be something that's going to help you, I don't know, stay on track is something to kind of think about. I found it's easier to do that sooner rather than later because once you get in a program and try to figure out that and sleep schedule and workout schedule and that sort of thing, I think it's difficult. So that's one thing that I recommend to a lot of students considering graduate school, just to work on and think about ways in which they can kind of tweak their schedule and begin to kind of act as if they are a graduate student in a graduate program. It kind of makes that transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really good something to work on as you're coming out of undergrad, or even right before you get into grad school. The sort of like taking a hard look at, you know, what your motivations are and your I guess how you do things.
Yeah, because I think it takes, and I think we can all agree, it takes an insane amount of effort to get some of these like assignments and just to get to graduation, whether it's master's or PhD. So yeah, I think it's kind of hard to see that in undergrad, like, you know, kind of thinking about what Jonathan was saying when the kind of goal is like get the classes finished. But yeah, your role definitely changes, I think.
Okay, so we've got about 1 minute left. It'd be how many? I'm just curious how many questions are in the queue. I think we should probably end though. Do you know how many questions are?
We've gotten through all of the questions asked in the chat. Thank you to those who did ask those questions. And I think we are, I'll check in with Esmeralda for the ones on the Excel sheet.
There's a couple in here.
A couple? Okay.
I think we're going to do another one of these though.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Ed. Okay. I think in the meantime, we might be able to answer those questions so folks don't have to wait too long to see those answers. So we'll probably put that onto a Word document, and that can be available if you know, or email that to you. We'll probably also put it on our STEM Inclusion Council website that's actually geared towards undergrads and actually has a lot of good information on there. So we'll post the link for that on the YouTube account. I think that we can sign off. Thank you guys so much to the graduate students and everybody who asked questions, especially just also thank you very much to Sarah for doing the presentation that had so much great information in it. And then, yeah, thank you all to the graduate students that took time out of your busy schedules to do this for, an hour and 15 minutes. So this is great. So, all right.
Can I just throw in real quick, and I'm sure this also applies for a lot of other folks. I'm very active on Twitter, JFMcLaughlin92. If you have questions, follow-up questions or anything, feel free to tweet at me or send me a DM, and just I'm always happy to chat about grad school, about my research, about birds in general. So don't be shy. I don't think I'm that scary. So yeah.
So, okay, does anybody else have comments that they'd like to say now?
You can check out the Ask a Grad Student website on OU, created by Paula. Also, shout out to Paula for moderating this. She's done a great job. So thank you for that.
That's great. Okay, then.
Yeah, I think we will also try to add links to stuff in the description of this video once it goes up.
That's great.
Yep. I will go ahead and get ready to end the stream. Does anyone have anything else beforehand?
I can have, if you need the PowerPoint, if you have any questions, also I'm on Twitter, but we have resources like the logs that I mentioned, Excel sheets that you can put these things in. Feel free to reach out and we can send this to you, and I can send them to you, Paul, if you want to have links to put them on the website.
Yes, that would be wonderful. So, okay. Yeah, thank you everybody then for asking questions, and then all the grad students. So we'll do this again. I think this went well. So, all right.
Thank you, everyone. Stream is ending now.